Great. So first question, what is dooring, since you brought us there, Laura, and what are your tips to avoid it? And so the first person, if you could define it, and then however many of you have tips, please share them.
Okay. I will start that conversation because I think about dooring a lot. As a cyclist, the only two crashes I've ever been in have actually been doorings, and in my opinion, a dooring is when a car door obstructs your path and causes you to get into a crash. But that shouldn't be confused with what is actually illegal. Cars aren't allowed to open their car doors in your path, whether or not it results in a bicycle crash. Am I correct on that? I believe.
Yes.
Yeah. And to avoid dooring, that's a tricky discussion. I mean, staying out of the door zone, obviously, is really important, but sometimes that means you're in heavy traffic. Sometimes that means you're not in the delineated bicycle lane. And I think that this is a source of confusion for a lot of new cyclists because the bike lane is oftentimes in the door zone. So someone parks their car and swings their door open and it completely blocks the entire bike lane. So just to kind of get the discussion started on this. Anyone want to add to this?
One thing I wanted to add on that one is I think there's a context, sort of parked car context in which, and a topographical context that I think is important as part of the dooring discussion. I think as people who are bicycling are riding on flat ground or certainly going down a hill, I think people need to be far more cognizant of dooring. I think the incident of a door flying open in front of you, whether you're in a bike lane or whether you're not in a bike lane, can clearly be catastrophic. If you have the high speeds. So I'm sort of tying back to my earlier discussion about speeds. So that's something that as I'm riding and I'm knowing that my speeds, as I'm up, past 10, 12 miles an hour, because I'm on flat ground, I'm going downhill, I start drifting, shying a little bit further away from cars to avoid the door zone. I think that's critical. But going up a hill, even if it's a pretty minor grade or certainly a steeper grade, I personally, maybe not everyone would agree, but I personally will ride in the door zone if it's a busier street and it doesn't feel like there's a busier street where being out into the lane is not very comfortable. Riding in a door zone when I'm going up a little bit of a hill where I might be in the 8 to 10 mile an hour zone or speed, my ability to stop when a door flies open, even really at the last second, it's pretty easily done for me personally. So I think that's just something that people should really pay attention to. If you're going at a certain speed, especially downhill, just make sure you're 3 or 4 feet away from the adjacent car. But if you're going uphill, maybe you can relax a little bit. If you're riding in the door zone a little bit, it's probably not the end of the world. That's my personal opinion.
I wanted to add, a lot of the scenarios we're talking about is a bike lane where a car is parked and you're thinking about driver's side doors opening. You also want to think about being doored on the right. I actually was doored on the right. So here's a very common scenario in the Boston area where you have a line of traffic all stopped and you've got a small area to the right. And it is legal for bikes to pass on the right, unlike cars. However, be very careful doing that. So let's say you see everybody's stopped, there's a red light, and you're thinking, hey, I'm just going to cruise right up to the start of that intersection. You're allowed to do that, but I would say do it very, very carefully. Think about the case where I was, somebody 5 or 6 cars back was in a taxi cab and decided, hey, I'm going to pay my fare and get out. And I came up, and the door swung open, and there I was. Luckily, I was going slowly, as Phil said, and so it was more of everyone being scared and an oops rather than something more serious. But I would say be very, very cautious. Anytime you're passing stopped cars on the right, especially approaching intersections. It could be a door opening. It could also be pedestrians crossing, not at a crosswalk. They see stopped cars and they think, hey, and they don't see you coming, especially if they're large trucks. So again, You can pass on the right, and I would just say do it very cautiously and don't fly up to that intersection. You can just cruise right up and do that.
Yeah. And just to Laura's point too, I've been doored from the left twice, and both times in a bike lane. So it's not even just passing on the right, it's being in your bike lane and a passenger deciding they're ready to get out and not looking. And that's actually legally, for all of you to know and be prepared, the driver's responsibility legally to not allow their passenger to open a car door in your path. But other things to look out for?
I learned how to ride in Tampa, Florida, which is really a crappy place. And there's no infrastructure. So some of the things is that I think Phil's spot on. I think as you get into a denser environment, slowness can be your friend. But if you're going to be out, the more you get into the suburban and rural environment, speed can actually, the net differential can change. There's an equilibrium of that door zone to where when your net differential is 0, meaning you're going as fast as the cars, you might as well be out in their lane and so move away from that door. The other thing is body language and car language. If you see a human being in a car, they're not there long. So really look, there's an awareness. So take the headphones out. Like, you got to be all hands on deck when you ride a bike. And it's actually it's a liberating thing. But I just, and little things I've learned in urban cycling is when traffic comes to a stop, sure you can advance, but you should not be accelerating. You should just be coasting, and it is like come up off the saddle, get as high as you can get. And A, so you can be seen, and B, so you can see. So it's like bring the periscope up, come up off the saddle and look when you're going through that line of traffic, and you'll get so much more vision, and they'll be able to see you. And I think from an infrastructure point of view, we need to start talking about, less parking and more loading zones, more Uber zones, more kiss and ride zones for people to drop off, because that's a big problem. So that's enough.